Yep.
Okay, I think most people are getting in. In the interest of time, I know it's a couple minutes after. I want to welcome everybody to the August Clinical Research Connections meeting. I have one quick announcement. I'd like to welcome Eric McDonough from, well, previously from the Office of Regulatory Compliance. She has taken over as the program director of CREST from Aaron Mobley, and so you will see her and she will help lead these meetings going forward. Welcome, Aaron. And then I think Allison is going to speak on the research pharmacy.
Sure. So yeah, I would say congratulations to Aaron, and I'm just excited that CREST is continuing to grow and expand, and look forward to hearing what this next phase looks like. Obviously, we're sad to see you leave CREO, but those of you needing ct.gov help, Christy Williamson is kind of the interim support for that. So we'll try and keep everything moving forward the best that we can as we transition. But I think it's all a good move. So Sam Ellis was scheduled to join us today, but he is not able to at the last minute. So I can give you a very quick update on my understanding of where the research pharmacy is at as of Friday. I think I'm accurate. So I am pleased to say that the space construction issues are nearly done. There's one issue on airflow for compounding certain types of product that they're still working through, but it is open and is starting to dispense some of the oral medications. That's where they're starting. They will be prioritizing the CTRC active studies first. But they're also working on new studies. So please don't hesitate to reach out to them if you need help with pricing for grant submission. If you've got a new study coming up, they're very busy getting up and running. One, I'm sure if you are currently working with the CTRC, you are aware, but one change that will come from the outpatient CTRC switching to using the research pharmacy is that investigational product will not have a barcode on it that will connect it directly to Epic. And so there are some changes coming for CTRC policy that will also apply to university space where you are using investigational product. And so there'll be a double check policy that will be in place so that we can ensure safety of administration of investigational product. So I know the CTRC is working on that. That policy is just getting finalized, and I am sure they will then be training on that piece, but just be aware that that's a requirement that is coming from this move to the research pharmacy. There were other conversations about what this change with the research pharmacy will mean. So I'm assuming that Sam will come back and update at a later date. But if anybody has immediate questions, please don't hesitate to use the website and contact them directly. But I'm excited that we're finally getting up and running. Any questions on that? Otherwise, I think I'm handing over to Kat. Is that okay? Thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Allison. All right, let me just share my screen. All right, and I think everyone knows me, but if you don't know me, I am Kat Sutherland. I'm the Assistant Director of COMIRB, and we wanted to come today and give you some information on monkeypox. So currently there are 2 approved vaccines for the prevention of monkeypox. They're only approved for adults, and you do not need to submit to COMIRB if you are using them on label. If you are seeing patients who are under the age of 18, then you do have to contact FDA and request a single patient IND in order to get them a vaccine. As far as treatment, there is an investigational drug called TPOXX, and the CDC and FDA made the drug available through the Expanded Access Investigational New Drug. So that's the EAIND. There's already an approved protocol for the use of TPOXX, and it's an FDA regulated clinical investigation with an IND number of 116039. It is for use with adults and children. So how do you get TPOXX? The CDC has set up this really nice TPOXX page that has all of the information and all of the forms that you would need. So everything is on there. The page may change often and without notice, so be sure to check back frequently. The IRB reliance documents are available on that page if you do need them. And then you would follow the instructions for relying on an external IRB, which is the CDC IRB, on the external IRB page. And all of these links are within our monkeypox guidance, which we posted in the announcements on the front page of COMIRB. We do also have some late breaking news. It looks like UCH and UCD are going to set up one reliance, which Tom Campbell will be the overall PI. UCH is working on the internal process right now. I don't have all the details, but the focus is going to be on treating patients and reducing administrative burden. And I think we can get these slides out to you. If not, all of these links are included on our front page in the announcements under monkeypox information. Does anyone have any questions? No burning monkeypox questions. All right.
And Kat, yes, we will be sending out slides and a recording of this video to everybody that registered. Usually it takes a little bit for the video to get transcribed and everything. So we usually try to shoot for the end of the week or early next week for everything to go out.
All right, great.
I'll take over. I am John Heldens. I'm the director of COMIRB, and I've got 2 short topics to share with you today. Let's see. Okay. First, I want to follow up on a topic that was discussed a couple months ago. Oops, I opened the wrong. Well, let me just stick with secondary research. So what I want to talk about here is just some tips for rapid approval. I think many of you are familiar with our secondary research form, and of late, these have been taking a little longer to review, and so I think it's time to get some word out. So hang on a second. Back. All right. So secondary research is just research on existing data or specimens, or data or specimens that's going to be collected anyway. So if we can review it. Yes.
No, at least on my screen, I've got the COMIRB requirements for UC Health recruitment.
All righty. That's what I intended to open. Hold on. UC Health recruitment, COMIRB's requirements?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so a couple of months ago, UC Health gave a talk on this forum about UC Health Recruit. If you want to go back and look at it, you can look at the YouTube channel, CU Anschutz VCR admin. It's a June presentation around the 4:30 mark. They talked about two approaches for recruitment. One is called the research preference profile, whereby within My Health Connection, a patient can self-select their interest in hearing about research in areas of their choosing. Could be as a healthy subject or in areas such as longevity and women's health. And this would allow a research team to contact patients with whom they do not have a treatment relationship. The second is called patient opportunity placards, again within My Health Connection. The placards or ads would be for up to 5 studies would be displayed for each patient within their My Health Connection account. And with that option, a patient can simply click on the placard and be directed to a page to indicate their interest in learning more about that study. So what does COMIRB need from you? For the research preference profile in section K of the COMIRB application, just let us know that you intend to use this service for recruitment. In addition, explain how you plan to contact this cohort of patients. We prefer that you contact them through Epic My Health Connection first, as it's a very private and secure way to contact the patients. Regardless of how you intend to contact them, we need to review and approve your recruitment messaging. And with this method of recruitment, since you're going to contact patients with whom you do not have a treatment relationship, we do need to approve a HIPAA waiver. There's no problem, but we just need you to ask for the HIPAA waiver for this specific method of recruitment to release PHI to contact these patients. When you're recruiting UC Health patients, both COMIRB and the UC Health Patient Experience Group must approve the recruitment messages. We recommend that you obtain approval from Patient Experience first, and then COMIRB second. That's a pretty smooth process. If you're using this new method and contacting patients who've indicated their interest, we recommend that you include a sentence along the lines of, we're contacting you because you indicated you were interested in learning more about research opportunities. Now, if you want to use the patient opportunity placards, again, in section K of our application, just let us know that you want to use that for recruitment. And that's it for the placards. No, we don't need to see anything more because there are very tight constraints about how the placards are constructed and the wording. Patient Experience reviews them. They're very short. And of course, the patient clicks on the placard, so self-indicates that they want to hear more. We don't need to see the placard. This is the same process we have in place for the Anschutz Research Studies page. So, are there any questions I can answer about this from COMIRB's point of view?
John, do you know if this is available to people, to groups that are using Community Connect, the Community Partnerships Epic, as well as the UC Health Epic? So that would, and does it apply also to the Barbara Davis Center, which is Children's Epic, I think. So I think
that's Children's Epic, so I don't believe it would apply to Barbara Davis. I don't know about the community. I don't know if Marissa's on today or Lori.
Hi, John. I actually wanted to ask, do you want us to add it in the protocol too in the recruitment section, or just the application changes are enough?
No, in this case, I think the application changes are enough. The protocol can describe recruitment a little more broadly. And, for those of you that submit to COMIRB, for example, using a multi-center protocol that we didn't write, you can't edit that to include these local specifics. So the application form is appropriate and specific enough.
And John, it looks like there's a couple more questions in chat. Julie asks again, what is this type of recruitment called to reference and protocol application?
It's called, so there's the the UC Health research preference profile, if you're going to use that, that is what it's called. If you log into My Health Connection, if you're a UC Health patient, that's what you will see. And I believe that's what they prefer to keep it called. And the other one is called Patient Opportunities Placard.
And then the next, oh, go ahead.
If you want to contact UC Health about how to get data from the preferences, I think Marissa Macri is your contact. I believe she covered that back in the June presentation, so you can go back and look at that. Any guidance in using these methods for recruitment of studies that rely on an external IRB? I believe an external IRB would still want to review your messaging, and that's probably the most pertinent thing. You would still have to go through patient experience. I don't think it would be so important to use the specific terminology, but if anyone is on the call from the external IRB group that can speak to that, I'd welcome that, but believe that's correct. All right, very good. Then let me go to the other presentation. All right, is everybody seeing secondary research now? Great. One more time, secondary research. We can review these applications as expedited, exempt, or not human subjects. We've designed the process in such that just tell us what you're doing and we will provide the appropriate level review. And so the only wrong answers here are ones that are inconsistent or ones we know to be inaccurate. So overall, if you're submitting a secondary research application, be clear and consistent about any identifiers that you're going to save in your research records, even if you're saving those identifiers temporarily, and make sure your protocol and application match each other and accurately describe your plans. Careful about terminology. De-identified is used quite frequently and quite often inaccurately in these applications. So quick note on some terms that are important, and these are areas that I think are consistently misunderstood. One, dates are identifiers under HIPAA. So dates of clinic visits, dates of diagnosis, dates of progression. If you have these dates in your data set, it's not de-identified. Assume that free text fields, if you're using them for your research, include identifiers. We know that they do. A limited data set is a data set that can include dates, and it can include town, city, state, or zip code, but it can't include any other identifiers. A limited data set is PHI. It includes identifiers, so it is not a de-identified data set. If you're working with de-identified data, that means there are no identifiers at all included in your data set. And it also means you don't have a code to connect the data set back to some identifiable subjects or a data set with identifiers. Again, we can improve the research any number of ways, but it just has to be consistent. And if we know a data set isn't de-identified, then throwing that term in there somewhere slows the process down. Couple notes on our application form. And in number 6, we asked that you check any identifiers you're going to include in your research records. These are identifiers in your possession at any point. It is not about identifiers that you might see in the course of collecting your data, but you're not owning or possessing them. Another common area, we ask that you talk about whether you're going to record identifiers at any point, whether you're going to retain identifiers for a short temporary period of time, or just keep some identifiers. There's no wrong answer except one that's inconsistent with the protocol or other answers in the application, or one that we know is inaccurate. In your protocol, fully describe the data you're collecting for the research. Alternatively, upload a list of the data elements or a case report form. And if we are receiving data from another institution or we're sending data to another institution, please describe how those data are shared. Background again. This is only for research that involves analysis of data or specimens that already exist or are collected for purposes other than the research. So don't use this secondary research application if you intend to contact the subjects. At minimum, upload both the application and a protocol. Upload a list of the data elements or a case report form if necessary. Basic reminders, just make sure every investigator's uploaded a CV in InfoEd and completed their city training and annual financial disclosures. And finally, if the PI is a student, complete and sign and upload the mentor and mentee forms. So questions for you, but first a question to you. I know I'm not speaking to the group that is doing these forms for the first time. And we get a lot of these application forms from students, from PIs who've never submitted it before. So I'm not surprised there's a bit of a learning curve. So question I have for you for this group is, can you think of a way we can better get this information out to residents, fellows, a lot of the new PIs that are doing this sort of information? And secondarily, what kind of questions do you have for me? Okay, and then there's in the chat, you can find some information about who to contact at UC Health for these recruit methods, and that the placards are not available through Community Connect. Thanks for your time.
John, do you think that it'd be value? I pose it to the group in doing an infographic, kind of summarizing some of the material you showed that we could attach to the form so that it's just right there when people go to download it?
Yes, I do. I think anything to get information out, like a simple one-page form. We've talked about recording a short training session on these. We do give training sessions on secondary research, but I'm not, it's sort of a just-in-time kind of research submission. This is far and away our most common submission, by the way. So high volume of secondary research applications. So a little impact goes a long way.
And I would just say, I mean, that change to having a secondary use form has been hugely impactful in the timely review of this type of work. And so I think, thank you for just being thoughtful and allowing this research to kind of move as quickly as we can move it. So I think all of these things help.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's definitely helped. So, but as always, there's always continuous quality improvement. And thanks for the suggestion for rain, Garrett. Appreciate that. That's a good idea.
Thank you, John. And just anybody, if you have questions for John or Kat throughout the rest of the presentations, you can just reach out to them directly through chat. Again, we're going to send out PowerPoints probably by the end of the week with the recording and contact information if you have follow-up questions as well. Next up, we have Montel Tomez. She's the Deputy Director of Community Engagement and Research at the CCTSI. Montel, take it away.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. Let me share my screen here. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Is it big enough?
I think so. It's readable.
Okay.
There you go. That's even better.
There it is. All right. All right. So thanks for having me. I was asked to talk a little bit about our community-based research that we're doing to address COVID-19 vaccine hesitancy and health inequities in the community here in Colorado. We, and when I say we, I mean the Community Engagement Core of the CCTSI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. The name of the project is called COSEAL, and that stands for Community Engagement Alliance Against COVID-19 Disparities. This is funded through the NIH, and they are funding SEAL sites across the country. And the overarching mission of the SEAL program is to provide trustworthy information, to engage communities, and to really reach the people hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Each of the SEAL sites looks a little bit different, and they have we all have our own sort of approach to this. And in Colorado, we have two primary objectives. And the first one is to conduct community engaged research and outreach focused on COVID-19 awareness and education to address misinformation and distrust regarding not only COVID-19, but also vaccinations. And then we also want to promote, obviously, evidence-based response and mitigation measures. Our second objective is to promote and facilitate the inclusion of a diverse racial and ethnic population in clinical trials, so that it's more reflective of the populations that are most disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. In Colorado, we are utilizing two sort of primary approaches to this work. So we are working in several communities. I'm going to go over what those communities are in just a minute. But essentially what we're doing are 2 rounds of a process that we call community translation in each community. And essentially community translation is a process by which we take scientific evidence, evidence-based guidelines and best practices, and we work with the community to translate that into everyday practice. So that means translating that into messages, materials, and constructs that are really accessible to communities, and allowing them to really lead that process. So we're doing several rounds of community translation. And then we're also doing a baseline survey followed by subsequent surveys. So it's a longitudinal sort of process that really looks at knowledge, attitudes, intents, and actual vaccination rates in the communities. We are now in the middle of our second year of this project, and the second year looks much the same as the first year in terms of these 2 sort of methods. And then we've added some additional dissemination pieces, which I'll talk about as well. So what does this partnership really look like? So we've engaged the following communities in this work. So we're working with the urban Latino community in the Denver metro area and in Pueblo, Colorado. We wanted to get kind of a front range experience there. We're also working with rural Latinx communities in San Luis Valley, urban African-American and Black communities, mostly in the Denver metro area, obviously including Aurora and the surrounding communities. We're also working with rural African immigrants in Fort Morgan and Greeley, and that's primarily been the Somali community, which is actually quite sizable up there in the northeastern Colorado. And then also the urban American Indian and Alaska Native community in the Denver metro area. So our guiding principles in this work have been, our main guiding principle has been maintaining cultural integrity. And making sure that we're walking our talk in terms of engagement and equitable inclusion of folks. So what does that mean? That means that we try to be very respectful of relationships. We are harnessing other people's relationships in many cases in the community, and we don't want to do anything to damage those relationships. So we have to really be mindful of that. We really focus on community-led processes. At least that's we strive to do that. I think sometimes we fall short here just because of the system that we work in, and it makes it hard to allow the community to really lead everything, but we're figuring it out. We reimburse our community partners for all of their work. We approach it as fair, not free. And we utilize a fair market value to reimburse them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We value their knowledge and their expertise in their communities. We look at them very much as consultants who are bringing a very specific set of expertise and skill set to the table. And we put that right on par with our own scientific skill sets. We want to be transparent with pretty much everything we do, and that means the budget, what we're struggling with, how things were really going in the project, why decisions are made, how they're made. We want to be able to really foster trusting relationships, and transparency is really important for that. We also really respect the unique traditions, history, and cultural norms of each of the communities that we're in, and those all look very different, but it's important that we do that and that we remember that we're guests. We also have approached this using sort of a social justice framework, and I really how this has played out has been in these culturally based pieces. So we make sure that we are looking at language justice, that we look at the locations of in the state where we are working and engaging people, and we make sure that we're respectful of boundaries, that we go in and that we aren't like a bull in a china shop, and we really reach out to community-based organizations and other people to let them know we're there, to provide information, to answer questions, to reassure them that we will share the data that we get. And that's gone a long way toward getting support from the larger community. And we've actually been able to engage folks as sort of external advisors to the project, and that's helped a lot. We're inclusive in terms of gender, age, all of the demographics, and ability, things like that. So we really try to be inclusive and equitable in our engagement work. And then again, I'll just point to the fact that we're leveraging community connections, and so we have to be ever mindful of that. So a little bit more about the engagement piece. So we're partnering with influential community members, building trust, striving to meet each of the community's unique needs, and they are very unique. We can't use a cookie cutter approach, and that's difficult for researchers sometimes because we want it to be kind of, look the same in every community so that we can compare and really kind of control that, but it doesn't work like that for this project. They are very much a common framework exists, but within that, there's a lot of variation in how the communities have decided to move forward. A couple of things that we've done. The first thing we did was hire community connectors in each of those communities to act as consultants, and their job was to sort of recruit data collectors, to recruit and vet community translation participants, to manage those sort of activities on the ground. So they are our point people. And we've structured it that way so that, the data collectors and the other community members on the ground have a trusted individual that they're working with. That helps us to it reduces the likelihood that we're going to put our foot in our mouth somewhere or hurt relationships. We really, or look like we're coming down from Denver to save the community. They can solve their own problems. We're just there to help facilitate. And then the community data collectors were hired in each community, and I'd say anywhere between 2 and 4 data collectors per community were hired. And their job was to recruit the survey cohorts, and we did 100 to 200 people per community. And they also administered the surveys. I'll say something else about this really quickly. Because they're collecting data, we obviously had to provide human subjects research training for them. And we also had to provide training around collecting data and the protocol and, how to work through the survey and all of those things. So there's a lot of work in the background that happens to set people up for success here. And COMIRB was a great partner for us in allowing us flexibility in in how we train folks with their human subjects research training. So I shout out to COMIRB for that. So in terms of structure, this is sort of what the partnership looks like. We have an administrative leadership team, it's the PIs, the leads of each of the survey arms or teams, those being the survey team, our community engagement team, and then the community translation team. Any one of these things could be a project all by itself. So this was a huge undertaking to do. And initially, it was supposed to all happen in 1 year. And we had 2 weeks to write the application, and it was funded like 2 weeks later. So it was a super fast turnaround. And had we not had some relationships in place and not had an engagement infrastructure already through the CCTSI, I don't think we would have been able to pull this off. Our community connectors primarily work with the community engagement team as their kind of primary contact, but there's also a bidirectional relationship between, the community connectors and the survey team and translation team as well. They work very closely. The data collectors and the community translation participants largely, as I mentioned earlier, report to the community connectors, but we've also been able to engage these folks, through each of the teams as well. But we try to streamline communication as much as possible so that we don't inundate people. And then finally, we've developed a community clinical trials advisory board as part of this work, and they meet regularly and help to advise, other researchers about how to engage communities in clinical trials. And then also I mentioned other community partners who are acting as sort of external advisors. So a little bit more about our community connectors, and this picture was taken in the San Luis Valley of our community connector there, distributing the materials that they created through the community translation process. A couple of really important things to note about a community connector and who would make a good community connector if you ever wanted to use this model. But they are trusted and very well connected in their community. They know what's going on, they know sort of the cultural nuances in the community, and they're really able to kind of make sure that we're honoring those things and not, again, hurting relationships. Often they need to be bilingual. Typically, we've had the best luck with folks who have some knowledge of public health or community health. We consider them the gatekeeper of gatekeepers. They are leaders, they have leadership qualities. They are really always wanting to ensure that we're building capacity in community and upholding cultural integrity. For our data collectors, the prerequisites were sort of, they needed to know their community. They needed to have access to folks who might otherwise be kind of hard to reach. And we really looked across the data collectors in the community to make sure that they were able to recruit a diverse sort of subset of the population. So not everybody looks the same, in terms of age and gender and all of that kind of stuff. Often they needed to be bilingual to, again, ensure that there's language justice. They recruit the ability to recruit study participants. They're administering the surveys, which can be a little intrusive. So it was important that they had trust, that they were also seen as leaders in the community, and they were also holding up the cultural integrity piece. I mean, these are folks who were going into people's homes, things like that. So it's important that they were trusted. As I mentioned, our community connectors and data collectors led the recruitment of community members for the survey. They really leveraged their longstanding community relationships to engage community members very quickly, but still authentically in a matter of months, where it would have normally taken us years to really get folks on board like that. We had a huge priority for safety. We're doing this in the middle of a pandemic. And in a lot of the communities, doing an electronic survey wasn't a possibility. You know, there's a real divide in communities when it comes to access to technology or the ability to really work with technology like Zoom. And it's not a survey that's super conducive to doing on the phone. So we really had to pay attention to what was going on in the field, what the numbers looked like in terms of COVID-19, you know, prevalence in the community. And we had to kind of adjust as we went to make sure that we weren't putting people in a situation where they were going to end up being a super spreader of some kind. We remained inclusive and flexible at all stages of the project. I'll talk a little bit about the community translation piece and what that looked like in each community. So again, community translation is a process where the communities are taking medical jargon and making it, you know, digestible for communities in a way that you can understand and appreciate and resonate with. So community members basically learned about COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines. We invite a medical expert to talk to the group, and the group is usually about 8 to 10 people total per community. This was sort of an 8-week process that they went through. So it's not like a focus group. It's much more involved than that. Once they learn about the messages, or excuse me, once they learn the facts around COVID and vaccination, they sort of look at what they're hearing about people's hesitancy and the misinformation that's been, spread in the community. And they decided which messages were the most important for their community to hear. And once they did that, they went through a process with a media designer to create messages, materials, and plans to disseminate those materials in their community to address that misinformation. This is an example of something that was created in the Somali community. The Somali community was a little bit challenging because a lot of folks aren't, they're not literate in their own language. They don't read or write in their own language. So it was kind of difficult. We also had to pair this with a lot of word of mouth, like presentations, community forums, and things like that. There was also a short animated video that we did that was really very well received and something that anybody could, access and understand. This is the group that we worked with. That gentleman standing and speaking is our community connector, Mahat. In the urban African-American community, they created a video that is available on YouTube. And it's professionally done. It's a conversation in a kitchen, about vaccination, and it addresses a lot of the misinformation that we hear out and about in the community. And they, distributed this widely to, people in their community. In the rural Latinx community, initially they really focused on, this was right around the time of Dia de los Muertos, and they wanted to utilize the community events that were already sort of ongoing around this to engage people in conversations about COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccinations. So you can see the materials on the table there that they created. They were very well received in the community. And then in our second round of community translations, they did a coloring book in both Spanish and English for kids to encourage, children to be vaccinated and to also promote other things they could do to mitigate risk of getting COVID or spreading COVID. In our urban American Indian, Alaska Native community, they did like comic books, posters, things like that, and they put them in different locations. They took them to powwows, they took them to different community events, and also did surveys in some cases at these events. So that's how they connected with people. In our urban Latinx community, that's George Ottoby. He's a man about town in Pueblo. He's also a veteran and was really helpful in helping us distribute materials. Pueblo created posters and bus ads, and Denver as well did the same thing, but they were sort of, personalized for each community. And that's what some of the bus ads look like. There's another one in English. These are some of the messages. All of the translation was, done by people in the community, professionals in the community. We didn't hire some national firm to do it. And just to make sure that the translation made sense. Here's another one. In terms of dissemination, again, the community really guided dissemination efforts. We did community events, even door-to-door sort of conversations. We did community talks and platicas to address people's questions about COVID-19. So we had 2 of our docs do a series of webinars for folks in the San Luis Valley so that they could just ask questions and get, information about COVID and a lot of questions about, is this am I gonna not be able to have kids if I take this, or, lots of those kind of common myths that were floating around. So they were able to address those. And so finally, some of the conclusions that we've come to and that we expected were that community connectors and other gatekeepers really authentically can engage communities in a matter of months to help us move quickly when we have something like a pandemic happen. Hiring and training community members to serve as data collectors really places data collection in the hands of trusted community members. It allowed for a diverse sample within each community, including those most impacted by misinformation. And then the community translation process supports the formation of critical partnerships with researchers, medical experts, and community members. It increases, relevance of interventions and information at the local level and delivers those messages through effective multi-level channels. And final slide is just something that I like to leave people with. Investing in long-term community relationships, hiring trusted individuals, providing anti-racism education and training to academic teams, because that was a big issue, and training and working within a social justice framework were all very necessary components to this sort of research infrastructure that we built around this program, and that we leveraged also some existing infrastructure. So that's it. I'm happy to take any questions if we have time. I don't know if I went over time.
Oh, you're great, Montel. I think we have about 10 more minutes left. So if anybody has questions for Montel, please put them in chat, or you can just speak up.
I have a question, Montel.
Mhm.
How do you see this kind of approach working in for other types of research-related issues?
I think the takeaway is that when we engage communities from the beginning, community members or the people who are most affected by the issue that you're studying, you have a whole different level of insight into how successful you might be on the ground recruiting people, how you're messaging things in order to get people on board or to retain them in your study. Being able to form personal relationships with people, which is usually, we have a research subject and then we have the researcher, and we kind of blow that up a little bit in this kind of work, but makes people feel human and it makes people feel comfortable and safe. And I think there's a safety issue and a trust issue that is really mitigated when you have somebody from the community or from that community of patients or whoever is most affected, helping to sort of steer the ship a little bit.
So if we had research coordinators who'd like to learn more, how do they contact?
So you can contact me directly, and I'm happy to have Natasha or somebody send out my information. But it's montel.tomez@cuanschutz.edu. You can also find me on the CCTSI's website. We have a webpage dedicated to COSEAL, where you can also go and look at some of the materials and videos and things like that that I talked about briefly. And if folks would like to learn more about community engagement, especially as it pertains to the work that folks do as research coordinators, recruitment, consenting, having these conversations with people, we offer consultations and trainings. We have a group of community research liaisons who are embedded in communities across the state who really help to guide that process and that work. And I think, I'm looking on the screen, and we've worked with several folks I can see on the screen. So those are just a couple of ways that we could connect.
Thanks. And I would strongly advocate that people use the community engagement consult group, because as you say, getting input early can make a huge difference, and they're very willing to give their time and are very thoughtful in how they approach things. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Any other questions for Montel? It looks like Natasha posted the link to the community engagement CCTSI website if you are interested. All right, well, thank you all for your time. Thanks to Allison, John, Kat, and Montel for presenting today. Plug for next month, we will have environmental health and safety coming and giving a talk for the September meeting. And then, as always, we are looking for ideas for speakers or topics that people want us to cover these meetings. So please reach out. Matt just put the email address in the chat, as well as the clinical research connections at cuanschutz.edu. So please reach out to that email if you have ideas for future meetings. And with that, I think we're done. So thanks so much for your time.